And welcome to episode number 23 of 11 First Spotlight. I'm Kate Moody. In this weekly show, we shine a spotlight on the best and brightest in the tech and financial services industry to try and understand what gets them going, growing, and what they think the future of the industry will look like. A big part of this show is your involvement, our audience, your questions. So please leave them in the comments sidebar. We'll do our very best to answer them live for you today. On today's Spotlight, I'm delighted to be joined by Julie Ann Haines, CEO at Principality.
Hi, Kate. Nice to be here.
Hi, Julie. How are you doing today?
I'm really good, thank you.
How's life in Wales at the moment? Are you based in Wales?
I am. I'm sitting at home in Cardiff at the moment, and the sun is shining, and it definitely feels like spring is coming, and that's a welcome relief, isn't it? It's been a hard 12 months for everybody. But I think we're all showing fantastic resilience, and hopefully the end is coming. And obviously it's rugby season, so that's certainly helped to get us through the last few weeks.
Yeah. And I don't know of our audience today how many people are rugby supporters, but yeah, Julianne and I've had a little chat about rugby before we start. So
no ban.
Well, on today's show, we're probably not going to talk about rugby. I'm not ruling it out, but we're going to be talking about the Welsh Fintech scene. Really interesting blend of heritage and innovation going on. So kind of really interested to dig into that and get your perspective on that. But first off, before we jump into that, it would be great to just get a quick introduction to you, to Principality. Can you tell us a bit about your role as CEO, how that came about, and about the business in general, really? That'd be great.
Yeah, fantastic. So I was appointed CEO in September last year. I've actually been at the Society for 14 years. I joined 14 years ago, never quite believing that I would probably stay for 14 years or indeed ever become CEO. So it's definitely been fantastic learning for me, and a great opportunity to just learn a huge amount about not only the Welsh business sector, but mutual building societies. And I guess in that 14 years, we've seen such huge change occurring. So it's been a fantastic opportunity. So a little bit about Principality. We were founded 160 years ago in Cardiff. It was a group of individuals who were getting together to talk about how ironic the shortage of great affordable homes for the people of Cardiff. And Cardiff was going through a huge amount of expansion in terms of coal, steel, and therefore there was this real shortage of quality homes. And our purpose very much is the same today, 160 years later. So it's about helping people to get and stay in a home. It's about helping people to prosper in their homes. And everything we do as a mutual business, that means that we're owned by our members, our customers, is really about being able to demonstrate and help them to achieve their sort of goals and aspirations. And I'm really proud of sort of not only our history, but also of the transformation journey that we've been on in the last sort of five to 7 years, and the opportunities that lie ahead.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic story, both for the business and for you individually. And I think I'm sure we'll come back to it as a theme today, that kind of heritage innovation blend and kind of how you can kind of get the best from both worlds. That's super interesting. I saw on your profile, kind of in terms of your history of the business, so prior to being CEO, you were sort of a customer director, I believe. So
that's right.
I don't think you can see on the screen. I'm biased. I work in a customer role at 11FS. So, I suppose, what have you taken from that experience in that customer role? How have you taken that through into your role now as CEO? What's kind of been the positives about, or the challenges maybe?
Yeah, so I guess the customer role is I had responsibility for all of our marketing, our products and propositions, and all of our channels and our strategy. And so, for me, getting that closeness to the customer is absolutely vital, particularly in a world where we are clearly dealing much more in a digital way. Our business is very much all being differentiated about both its values and closeness to communities, but also in terms of the standout experience that it provides. So how you bring that experience from what's traditionally been a very branch-based, community-based organization into that digital arena is clearly, quite challenging, but a real opportunity, as we've seen advancement in technology and the ability for us to really bring the best of the branch experience into that digital. So closeness to customer, member, maintaining that real strong route back to purpose, integrity, and having impact in communities and for customers and members are the things that I guess I'll bring forward into my role.
Awesome. Yeah, no, and obviously you've touched on kind of that balancing out between keeping the best of that sort of heritage to the branch relationship and kind of moving kind of that forward into the digital space? I mean, obviously you guys have got a huge amount of heritage as a business. So what have been the key things that you've looked to retain as you've started to move into that digital space?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've seen in particularly the last 18, 24 months is that particularly younger consumers are still very motivated and increasingly motivated by businesses that have integrity and businesses that are thinking through about the wider impacts and being responsible business. So that's something for me that to some extent within the business, it's easy to take that for granted because it's part of our DNA. It's part of what we all exist to do. But I think recognizing that we need to change that we need to really recognize that that is a competitive advantage and that we need to dial that up. So I think that would be point one. Point two, I've already touched on. If you walk into one of the branches that we have, our teams would know you, know your background, know your family. They'd be referring to you, but by name. How does that experience translate in a world with clearly data and AI and that ability to have that very personalized and tailored experience? So when I talk about bringing the best of branch into that digital environment, then it's really about how do we bring that knowledge and that personality and that real ability to be proactive, to be able to solve those sort of needs that consumers have, then that's really the second area that I would focus on. So, it's with the pandemic, there's clearly been an acceleration towards digital, and we've not been immune to that. Our branches have remained open over the past 12 months for sort of essential transactions, and I'm massively grateful for colleagues who have been out in their branches day in, day out, even in times where we were scrabbling to get PPE and the like. But I think, what we've seen is that acceleration towards digital will only continue. And therefore, that means we've got to work really hard, invest even harder to ensure that we really can make doing business with us as easy as possible. And as I say, bringing sort of that personal, tailored, proactive experience to customers.
No, it's really, really impressive to kind of hear that balance. So, and we're going to chat a little bit today about, I suppose, the Welsh fintech scene more broadly. So, we might have some people listening in who know it innately and kind of know it really well. How would you describe it to somebody, so maybe someone who's not been paying attention? What are the key things for people to know about what's happening in Wales at the moment?
I think over a long number of years, we've seen real focus in driving financial services within the Welsh economy, and particularly South East Wales, and Cardiff as sort of capital city is clearly. And there's a whole host of, the sort of more traditional sort of banks and building societies that have had operational areas here. But I think over the last 3 to 5 years, what we've seen is some of the expertise in our university sector has really spawned that a real sort of drive towards investment and support of the fintech ecosystem. And, I was delighted that sort of 18 months ago, the Welsh Fintech was set up to really very much act as a trade body for the area. And I was lucky enough to sit as an advisor on the advisor panel of that organisation. And what we see here is the mix of academia, the more traditional organisations like Principality or Admiral, working in conjunction with entrepreneurs and sort of the guys who are really working hard to come up with breakthrough innovation. That there's a lot of partnering, there's a lot of support and collaboration. And indeed, when you then expand that out across our professional services network that exists here as a capital city, then it's a really great place to do business. And of course, what we also see is that it's a great place to live, to bring up a family. So having spent a number of years in London, which I absolutely loved, but there's a real enjoyment of being in a smaller city with generally speaking, it's much cheaper to live here. And again, I think from a work-life balance, and some of the other advantages of not living in London, then what Cardiff offers really is a fantastic business environment supported by a really thriving sort of capital city environment, but much more affordable for people. So it's very dynamic. It's quite fast paced. It's expanding at quite a. It's really over the last 18 months expanded quite significantly. And I think that trying to get all of the stakeholders together to continue to work hard to create this sort of environment where businesses can flourish and tech can flourish is massively important for the wider Welsh economy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think I saw a report recently, I think sort of August last year, of a law firm that was sort of commenting that Wales's digital economy is the fastest growing outside of London in the UK. So we've touched on some of the maybe ingredients or factors of that. But yeah, what if you had to kind of pin it down to one thing? Like what do you think has really helped accelerate that growth in Wales at this particular moment in time versus maybe earlier on or previously?
So I think there's been fantastic passion showed by a number of real thought leaders, individuals who've really driven their organisations and taken real ownership for that. So passion, and I guess in Wales, there's a very collegiate, collaborative environment between all of the various stakeholders. So if I look at my own business, we partner with a number of the local universities to bring graduates in or and do placements, and that again we have schemes across financial services and fintech organisations in Cardiff to do that. So collaboration, I think, has been massively important, and real focus. So focus to say Wales has clearly changed massively in terms of the structure of its economy over the last sort of few decades. And so we need to identify those areas where there can be growth, there can be employment. So all of the stakeholders are very much aligned to looking at the areas that we would see. So that's certainly helped, as well as skills. So from the universities, we see real talent coming to Wales. And what we want to make sure is that that talent doesn't leave us to go down the M4 corridor. And how do we retain those skills? By creating the opportunities for people to find fantastic careers, here in Cardiff and the wider sort of South Wales area.
Yeah, no, absolutely. A question from Mike Fuller, who's asking, how does catering for a multilingual customer base help or hinder you when it comes to digital transformation? I can sing the Welsh national anthem, but that's about it. But obviously, it's a beautiful language, but I'm sure it must create some challenges for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. So we obviously we've got 500,000 members and across Wales, and within Principality, we hear from our customers and our colleagues how important it is that we support Welsh culture, and that obviously includes language. I think what we've done is very much listened to what members think is important to us. We've worked very collaboratively with the Welsh Language Commissioner to talk about the areas where it would be absolutely essential to do that. And our approach is that where we can and where there's that demand, then we will offer bilingual. And what that means is, if you look at our website as an example, up to the point of where you really are applying for product, then we will offer everything bilingual. But what we found is we have tested bilingual, that actually most consumers, even if they are Welsh language, don't really then opt to work the whole way through the application journey, and therefore the tech at that point then becomes focused on English. But again, then at the end of that application, consumers can opt to receive everything bilingual in terms of communication. So it's just about being close, understanding, but recognising that there's no point offering and maintaining and adding to that sort of total cost of ownership if actually the consumer demand isn't there for it. And when we did offer both, what we saw was that on average 98% of applications were coming in, and that's lower than what you would see as the sort of proportion of Welsh speakers, which would tend to be 15 to 20% of the population in Wales, depending on where you are geographically. Okay. So it's complexity, it's about listening to your consumers, but being sensible and engaging in conversation where you can do.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, we've talked a little bit about, I suppose, what's been successful in Wales up to now. We've touched on, obviously, the impact of the pandemic on the uptake of digital. I suppose the next question, which comes up again and again, is the impact of the pandemic on post-pandemic working life, working balance, companies moving out of London, maybe particularly as a trend. How do you see that having an impact on the Welsh fintech scene? I suppose specifically, maybe Wales more generally.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where organisations like mine, with the heritage, as you've called it, to some extent, were off the pace. So I think there was probably, a growing demand from colleagues to want to work much more remotely. And I think, if I'm honest, I didn't challenge hard enough to set up the organisation to be able to do that. And I think that's where, fintech and the sort of third sector universities have been much, much better at adapting to that. So I would say we went into the crises behind what was going on in the wider sort of ecosystem. But what I would say is that, clearly we very quickly, I think it was the 15th of March last year was the last day that we had significant numbers of colleagues in our head office. We normally have about 880 colleagues in head office in Cardiff. We've been operating at less than 10 since that date on sort of the 18th of March. And we've constantly been asking colleagues for their views and their feedback as to what suits them. We're never going to go back to 880 colleagues in our head office. But what we are hearing is that about half of our colleagues want to be in 2 or 3 days a week. And when they're in the office, it's for that greater collaboration time. It's for those sort of, whiteboard sessions and sort of time at the boards. And so therefore what we're doing is reconfiguring our office space to make sure that it's less desks and less functional and more about creating that sort of open and collaborative space. So, we remain committed to having a head office in Cardiff, but it will never be the 880 sort of desks. Our contact centre colleagues are enjoying the fact that they can take calls at home. They're saving on their commute time into the city centre and the cost of that, and achieving that better work-life balance, which, as a working mum, there are days I miss the office, but there's also days I quite enjoy sticking, the washing on at lunchtime or being around on a Friday when the kids, well, they've only just started back at school this week, but when they get in at 4 o'clock, and I don't think I'm any different from anybody else, that we've got to recognise that work-life balance ultimately is good for colleagues, and what's good for colleagues is good for business and the sort of the wider impact that we can have.
Yeah, no, 100%. Have you kind of seen any early signs? Obviously, kind of one of the areas of maybe change could be that more founders, for example, decide to start a business in Wales or in other parts of the UK, maybe that we're moving away from that, potentially that London hub concept. Have you seen any early signs of that? Are there any kind of new business starting up that that have caught your eye that you think are signs of things to come?
Yeah, very much so. So I think, we've seen the kind of the race for space, as we'd call it, where people are moving out of London and looking for a bit more space and, the garden and the like. And I think that, the fact that we've broken down those very traditional sort of thinking and hierarchies about you're needed in an office environment to work has meant that, whether that be founders or whether, sort of organizations who maybe have been thinking about scaling up a bit more, that they absolutely are looking to find new locations. And, we've got some fantastic examples of that sort of happening at the moment in Cardiff and Wales. So I think it's fantastic, because anything we can do to, reduce the cost of office space and commuting, and make sure then that actually organizations and founders can have more time on, sort of creating value, then ultimately that's for the good of their business. Suppose I'm thoughtful about how quickly we've had to innovate to continue to engage with customers. How do you do sort of more human-centered design in a way where you're not sort of in getting all those customers together in a room and you're not watching them and you're not sending your teams to observe what's going on? And clearly that for in our business needs a bit more work. But I think generally speaking, this is enabling people to really take a step back and think, where do they want to locate? What's going to work for them? Where are those skills? Where are the grants and the loans that enable people to potentially be attracted to the Welsh market as well? And obviously, ensuring that all of those sort of elements are there, I think is really important.
Yeah. Obviously, I've seen it. Wales, like the rest of the UK, Wales has been hit hard economically by COVID. So, do you think kind of those shifts and those changes can help kind of Wales as a nation kind of boost the economy, get the economy back up and running again? What's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think in Wales, we recognise that the economy does need to continue to move to sort of higher skill. And, as I said earlier, there's real centres of excellence here already. So the ability to continue to create that wide ecosystem of organisations here, it's like the snowball, isn't it? It builds scale, it builds momentum, the pool of investors and talent and sort of ideas then improves. So I think, we've made huge progress, as I talked about earlier. There's still a lot to do, though. And so how we get sort of the accelerator and the hub sort of really working together and, ensuring that we continue to invest, I think will be really important. But there's a lot of I think there's a lot of desire to do that, and I think hopefully as sort of governments start to come out of the immediate crises and think more about long term, how we build an economy that's really strong in Wales, then I'd be really hopeful that that we can really continue to build on the momentum that's already been achieved.
Yeah. No, watch out, London, watch this space. So I'm conscious of time. So one other thing I kind of really wanted to get your opinion on. Obviously, we can see that as part of this growing fintech ecosystem in Wales, there are lots of women who are leading some of those businesses or playing kind of leading roles in driving that. So obviously you are a female leader yourself of a big business. So how do you think female leaders can help drive the industry forwards and can really help grow the industry?
Yeah, I mean, we know that generally speaking that women are underrepresented in tech. And we also know that women are underrepresented in financial services. So, from my perspective, whilst I think, again, if I look in my business, when I joined 14 years ago, I was one of 3 women in the top sort of 40, 45 leaders. Now we're at almost half and half. Although at a sort of board and very senior level, we're probably still only about a third. So there's a huge amount more to do. And I think, again, some of the things we talked about in terms of creating that fintech sort of environment are equally as true when you start to talk about diversity and inclusion. So partnerships with colleges and universities and schools. We do a lot of work with schools to try and make sure that, particularly in disadvantaged areas, people understand what the opportunities are, and creating those sort of schemes for apprenticeships or partnering with colleges and unis is really, really important, because you can only do so much if you're looking at current workforce. This is about changing the demography who's coming into different sectors at a much younger age. And we know that the sort of perceptions of industries are set at a very young age. If I look at my own girls, I've got 2 daughters, and their views around what are cool jobs for girls are set incredibly young. So I think there's a huge amount to do. I think as businesses, what we can do is invest, tell stories, do things like this so that people can see role models, and hopefully that makes them think that if they are in these areas that they should push on. I didn't start my career as a tech person, and I'm not finishing it as a tech person, but having spent some time through my career on a whole host of digital and tech sort of roles, then I think it's just really incumbent on leaders like myself to get out and talk about what it took to take advantage of those opportunities, to build your confidence, to build your resilience, and understand that if you're one of the only women in the room of 10 or 20, then it's okay to find your voice. And if you're not heard the first time, then keep trying and build allegiances outside of the room. So I think there's a huge amount to do. It's not easily solved, but I think it's great that there are female role models. And I think actually in Wales, we're doing really, really well in terms of the fintech space, as you said, but I just think there's a huge amount more to do. And interestingly, it's not just about gender now, isn't it? The whole conversation has shifted hugely over the past 12 to 18 months. And I think, again, that the fintech sort of organisations locally can do a lot more to really celebrate sort of diversity and inclusion, and continue to really push that forward.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I suppose we probably don't have time to do it justice, but when you reflect back on some of the things that helped you get to where you are were there particular types of support or kind of moments that helped give you, talked about confidence and seeing that, so were there any particular things that were really helpful to help you get that confidence or have that drive?
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved learning, and I think that's been massively important. I can remember a conversation with somebody about, I was having a really bad time, and at work, and thinking, is this for me? And maybe I should consider being a teacher, because actually that's what I'd thought about when I was sort of leaving uni. And then that realization, well, actually, if my job as a leader is to help others, to build capability in others and belief in others, then actually how do I put my learning into practice in a different way? So that was really interesting. I think realizing what made me I describe it, what's my secret sauce? So what's the thing that makes me stand out? Because everybody has something unique to give, and spending time reflecting on what that was. And I certainly found, if I went back sort of when I first joined financial services sort of 18, 19 years ago, I hadn't worked in financial services before, and I felt almost a bit apologetic for that. And actually, it took me time to realize that was my USP. That was the thing that made me different. It made me think about customers over the financial risk of a certain item. It made me think about how we met the problems that customers have and how best to solutionize for those. And so I think it is about just working out what is it you bring that's unique, and having, just small moments to build that confidence, build that sort of resilience, and have a really big support network around you, whether that's at home, whether that's through networking, whether that's through mentors or a coach. All those things have massively helped me.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, no, 100%. And I suppose, this might be hard to kind of anticipate. I suppose if there's something that you'd like to see different in sort of a couple of years' time after you've had your position of leadership and you've put some things into place, what would you like to see change? I suppose both in Principality, but also kind of in some of the neighbouring fintechs around you in Wales.
Yeah, I think from a Principality perspective, as I touched on earlier, we're going through this transformation, blending the sort of the best of the heritage with hopefully, and a real sort of a business that's much more digitally enabled and better to meet needs amongst customers. But I think, if I'm really honest, at times I wish we didn't have the legacy to deal with. If you're a startup and if you're a founder, you can build only on the new, and at times that can be really, really wearing. So you've got this legacy technology to deal with, and you've got to be able to think about how you approach things. And what that results in sometimes is we're probably just not quite as agile. We're probably just not quite as pacey from a decision-making perspective. And culturally, then, how do we create an environment where it's okay to test things and learn and make mistakes? So I think that's probably, for me, the big opportunity for Principality, is just to continue that sort of more agile, more sort of test and learn culture, because I genuinely believe we've got great people, great ideas, and some good opportunity. I think from a wider perspective, it's about creating depth in that fintech market in Wales. So we need to see not just the startups and the founders come here. We need to see the successes come to fruition, and that's going to require us to work really hard in terms of how we bring investment to Wales. So, we've spent some time talking about, are people aware of Cardiff? That's equally true when you start to look at sort of the VC market and where money's coming from. And we've got to work really hard to showcase what we've got to offer here, and encourage people to consider sort of investing and getting behind Welsh organisations. So that, for me, is what will motivate me.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You sort of mentioned that the test and learn culture. I can see we had a question from Steve Dinnock as well, who was, I think we touched on this earlier a little bit, about the influence of your past roles, customer facing roles, your chief customer officer, and what your learnings have been from that. So Steve's asked, what's the number one learning from that role that you'll apply as CEO? So I know we've talked about that before, but yeah, if you had to condense it down to one thing, how would you condense it down?
Gosh. That's very typical of Steve. Hello, Steve. Nice. Thank you for the question. That's a really good question from Steve. I think it's, I felt I was being really courageous and trying to push the organisation, but I suppose what I've learned is, did I do enough? What more can I do? And I guess, being CEO now, I've got to live that ambition, haven't I, day by day. So I think it's probably be even more courageous and ambitious, and be restless for change. And that I suppose that would probably be the one learning, I would say. So we made lots of progress, but did it happen quickly enough? How did I approach it? Could I have done more? That's probably the area.
No, sounds like a good one. So we've run out of time, sadly. I could chat all day, but yeah, unfortunately we've run out of time. So massive thanks, Julianne, for taking the time to join us. It's been really, really great to hear from you. So where can people find out a bit more about you and everything you're getting up to Principality, if they'd like to?
Yeah, well, do feel free. I'm on LinkedIn, and we've got, obviously, through our LinkedIn and our .co.uk websites, we've got lots of sort of information about what we're up to, some of the exciting things that we're doing, some of the new propositions that we've launched to really help meet more needs amongst our members. So yeah, do check those out.
Cool, fantastic. Well, Sally, that's all we have time for this week. To our people tuning in today, please make sure you follow 11FS on LinkedIn so that you never miss an episode. Spotlight will be back next Thursday. Have a great week, everyone, and good luck, Wales, for the weekend.
Thank you.